Question. Order. Question number 9. Order. Right Honourable Winston Peters.
This question is to the Minister for Building and Housing and asks, does he still accept assurances from officials that concrete used in New Zealand is fit for the purpose?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the member some months ago sought assurance on whether imported high alkali cement was fit for purpose. The current issue is not about the standard of cement, but concrete. One of Firth's batching plants in Auckland had a malfunction due to a faulty load sensor, resulting in the incorrect mix and about 1,000 cubic metres of substandard concrete being supplied to 35 customers. The cement used was not high alkali, was not imported and was not at fault. The member seems confused about the difference between cement and concrete. The former is caustic.
Point of order, Speaker. It will be apparent to you that this was a very simple question. How the member could be confused or anything else, sir, which is what he's saying now, is surely not anything to do with the question. I've asked him a simple question. Is the concrete fit for purpose? And he is now attacking me for no good reason at all.
Speaking to the point
I haven't started on me yet.
Order.
I don't need answer. The issue of the question is, has he accepted the assurances that everything's in order? If that could be addressed, I'd be happy.
Speaking to the point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, I'll hear from the member.
Mr. Speaker, the question is with respect to, does he still accept assurances? The assurances that I gave in the question, as you'll clearly see from the Hansard, in February, was in with respect to cement, not concrete.
Order.
I have given this member...
Can the member simply ask the question today, has he accepted the assurances? That's the question that's being asked. I'll invite the member, the Right Honourable Winston Peters, to re-ask his question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister for Building and Housing, does he still accept assurances from officials that concrete used in New Zealand is fit for purpose?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
I have not given the member any assurances with respect to concrete. I did give him assurances with respect to cement. It's a pity the member doesn't understand the difference. Perhaps I'll take him to a building site.
You sound like a concrete block right now.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Is he... I'll lighten up, honey. Is he aware that a batch of imported cement in 2014 exceeded the 0.6% alkali safety level? And if so, what did he do in response to this issue at the time?
Right, the Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I sought advice from my officials, and the member has not produced a single qualified engineer who has concern about the high alkali cement. The concern is that if the cement is used correctly, as per the New Zealand standard, and is mixed correctly, that it produces perfectly safe and credible concrete.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
If that is the case, if his officials were able to assure him that imported cement is meeting standard and does not pose a safety risk to the public, as he has stated again today, why then have officials in his office on the 22nd of July 2014 stated that they were in a state of panic of getting questions on this issue?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, last year I asked for advice from officials about the cement. They said that it complied with the standard. I made the point that were there any engineers, people who are actually qualified in this subject, who were concerned about it? The answer there was not. And my simple challenge to the member, if he's got a concern about high alkali cement, rather than talking to those parties that do not want to have imported cement competing with that in New Zealand, give us an engineer's report that's got concerns.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Now, if it's good enough for Firth to do full plug inspections of their concrete to ascertain the quality of it, why was he not prepared to do that on the buildings that allegations of faulty cement were made about, rather than rely upon industry-conflicted assurances?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I relied on the advice of officials who I don't believe are conflicted in respect of the difficulty that has occurred with Firth. It is not an issue with the integrity of the cement. The issue is that a weighing device failed, the correct mix didn't occur, the concrete is not up to strength, it's been picked up in the testing, and the responsibility rests with Firth to work that issue through with the 35 customers that were supplied with the under-strength concrete. I stress the cement that was used in the Firth issue is perfectly up to standard.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston.
When will the Minister understand that this is not a question about Firth, but about substandard concrete from imported cement, which itself was substandard? And why has he not conducted one test on any of the buildings on which it's alleged this concrete cement was used?
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I repeat the simple challenge I gave the member at the time. Table a single qualified engineer's report of concern about the alkali cement, and I'm happy to then seek a review of that. Without that evidence, the member is simply playing a game of competition within the industry.
Question number 10, the Honourable